Imagine this. You're standing face to face with an enemy thousands of years ago. In your hand, you're holding a sharpened stick. That's it. That's your only weapon. Now, imagine the terror of realizing the person in front of you is holding something you've never seen before. A blade, long, sharp on both edges, built for one purpose only. You don't stand a chance. For most of human history, this weapon didn't exist. People fought with spears, with stones, with clubs made from bone and wood. And then, at some point, someone changed warfare forever. They created something that wasn't just sharp. It was precise, deadly at close range, capable of ending a life in a single motion. The sword. But here's the question almost nobody asks. Why did it take humans so incredibly long to invent something so simple? And once they finally did, how did a single weapon reshape armies, kingdoms, and the entire course of human history? Let's begin. To understand why the sword took so long to appear, you first need to understand what came before it. For hundreds of thousands of years, human weapons were simple. Sharpened wood, chipped stone, a rock tied to a stick. These weapons worked at a distance. You could throw a spear, you could sling a stone, but up close, in the chaos of a real fight, these weapons had a serious weakness. They were built for stabbing or striking, not for controlled, continuous combat. A spear could kill in one clean thrust, but if that thrust missed, you were dangerously exposed, fumbling to reset a long, clumsy weapon while your enemy closed the distance. What ancient warriors actually needed was something different. A weapon you could carry easily, swing quickly, recover from a failed strike in a fraction of a second. But there was a much bigger problem standing in the way. Materials. Stone could be sharpened into a deadly edge, but stone is brittle. Swing it hard against another weapon, and it shatters. Wood could be shaped into a long blade, but wood alone could never hold an edge sharp enough to matter in real combat. For a true sword to exist, humans needed something stronger, something flexible enough to survive impact, yet hard enough to hold a killing edge. And that material simply didn't exist yet. Not until humans discovered how to work with metal. The first true swords weren't made of iron. They were made of bronze, a mixture of copper and tin, discovered sometime around 5,000 years ago. And this discovery changed everything. Unlike stone, bronze could be melted, poured into a mold, and shaped into a long, straight blade with two sharpened edges. Early bronze swords were shorter than what most people picture today, often not much longer than a large dagger, because bronze, while stronger than stone, was still relatively soft and could bend or snap if made too long or too thin. Blacksmiths, some of the earliest specialized craftsmen in human history, spent generations refining the process. They learned the exact ratio of copper to tin needed for the strongest blade. They learned how to fold and hammer the metal to remove weaknesses hidden inside it. They learned how to balance a blade so it could be swung quickly, without tiring a warrior's arm in the middle of a battle. A well-made sword wasn't simply a sharpened piece of metal. It was a carefully engineered weapon, one that could take hundreds of hours to craft properly. And because of that, for a very long time, swords weren't common weapons at all. They were rare, expensive, often reserved only for warriors of high status, commanders, or elite fighters who could afford the cost of true, functional metalwork. For most ordinary soldiers, spears, axes, and simple clubs remained the standard weapons of war for centuries longer. But everything was about to change again, once humans discovered a metal even stronger than bronze. Sometime around 3,000 years ago, a new material began appearing in weapons across the ancient world: iron. Iron ore was far more common in the earth than the copper and tin needed for bronze, which meant iron weapons could eventually be made in far greater numbers. But iron wasn't easy to work with. Raw iron, without proper treatment, was actually weaker and more brittle than well-made bronze. Blacksmiths had to discover an entirely new set of techniques, heating the metal to extreme temperatures, hammering it repeatedly to remove impurities, learning that adding small amounts of carbon during the forging process created something remarkable, a much harder, stronger form of iron that could hold a sharper edge for far longer. This process, refined over centuries of trial and error, eventually led to steel, a material so effective that swords made from it would remain in use for thousands of years afterward. And once swords became easier to mass produce, everything about warfare changed. Armies no longer relied only on a small number of specially equipped elite fighters. Entire ranks of soldiers could now be armed with a weapon fast, versatile, and deadly enough to decide a battle in a single close-range clash. Kingdoms that mastered ironworking gained a devastating advantage over those that hadn't. Some historians argue that access to strong, reliable iron weapons directly influenced which civilizations rose to power and which ones fell behind. The sword had stopped being simply a weapon. It had become a symbol of status, of skill, of the difference between an ordinary fighter and a warrior trained for years to master it. And its influence didn't stop at the battlefield. Swords appear in ancient burial sites, buried alongside kings and warriors as symbols of honor. They appear in early mythology and legend, treated not as tools, but as objects worthy of stories passed down for generations. All of this from a simple ancient problem. Humans needed a weapon that could strike quickly, recover instantly, and survive the brutal chaos of close combat. It took thousands of years, generations of trial and error, and the mastery of two completely different metals to finally solve it. The sword wasn't invented in a single moment. It was built, slowly, painfully, one failed blade and one small improvement at a time, until it became one of the most iconic weapons in human history. If you enjoyed uncovering this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because history hides in the most unexpected objects, even the weapon that once decided the fate of entire civilizations. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.